Okay.
Thank you. I call the meeting to order Tuesday, January 8th, 2019, the City Council meeting for the City of University Heights. 4 council are present tonight, and Dottie Maher is present by phone. First order of business, approval of minutes, December 11th, regular council meeting, and December 29th, special council meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to either minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. Okay, first order of business, public input. Thanks for coming. Would anyone like to speak? Okay. Paul, do you want to take the phone too and speak in the microphone and to Dottie? Because I think she'll want to hear. Thank you, Paul.
Paul Moore, 1000 Melrose Avenue. I want to compliment the council and the police department by having the portable speed sign. I think that's a real good asset in slowing traffic down, especially coming in our entrance here. I like the fact that it's getting moved around once in a while too. On the December 29th minutes, it says you're going to have tonight talk about 2018 tailgating. It's not on the agenda. I was just wondering what the repercussions were. I have one statement to make. The University of Iowa trained people were on our bridge and blocking the sidewalk on the north side again. That needs to be addressed by next season. On the Olive Court project, when Josiah gets to that, I'm still looking for an 8-foot sidewalk, but I realize all the sidewalk improvements that are put in with Olive Court are going to get torn out. But I'm going to still stand for an 8-foot sidewalk on the
Olive?
south side of
On-
Melrose. Yep,
Okay.
up to Kosher.
Oh,
That's
on
all.
Melrose Avenue. Okay.
Got
Paul, when we get to, you're going to stay tonight a little bit. When we get to police report, I think Nate can probably answer some of your questions
Okay.
with the police chief report.
you.
Thank you, Paul. Would anybody else like to speak to the council tonight? Okay, thank you for coming. Before we do streets and sidewalks, is it okay with council? Jim Glasgow waited 2 hours last month, and he has about a 5-minute report, depending on, and he'd like to speak first. Is there any objection? Okay, Jim, thank you for attending.
I'll hand out if you take this.
Okay, there's 2 sets there.
Okay.
Dottie is not in the last one. Got councils. Okay. What
Different.
the pictures that you see right there, I mean, you're just looking really at dirt, but
So
the-
we're going to pass them all around because they're all
yeah,
different?
there's three individual.
Right, so there are
Yep.
2 sets of 3.
That's
So
correct,
This
yep.
side has 3 and this side
Yeah.
has 3.
Oh,
And what you're looking at there really is you're looking at the surface. There's a buried retention pond underneath that gravel and dirt, and that's the point we're at right now. Sewer and water is stubbed in. The retention pond is buried. It holds 51,000 cubic feet of water, and we're now in the process of bringing the site back up to grade. So we've got about another 3 foot of dirt to put in and compact on top, and then we'll be ready to start foundation. So that's going to happen in the next couple weeks. We'll be doing elevating the site and then also finishing the retaining wall, and we're going to probably start some railing and fencing on the retaining wall. So, and then by then I'm hoping it'll be warm enough in the spring and we'll start foundation. So that's what's going to happen the next few weeks. The weather's it is really going to depend what the weather is, what we can get done. But so far, we've had no frost in the ground, but we've had a lot of mud. So that's been our biggest problem here lately. So I guess if there's any questions other than that, we're moving ahead, and I'm hoping to start foundation at the end of February or early March, depending on weather. So
Just curious, do you have to truck in a lot of that
dirt, or is
Yeah,
it-
the soil that was there on site did not meet compaction tests, so that's why you saw a huge pile there, and that all got trucked out. And then we're bringing soil from the quarry back in now, and that'll be what we'll use to elevate the site and compact it back in, because we have certain specs we have to meet in order to put the parking lot on top. So most of the dirt that's there is kind of squishy. I mean, it just doesn't compact very well. So other than that,
Are there any questions for Jim?
Are you leaving after this?
yeah, I was going.
Okay.
But
Well, I just, I'm trying to get some numbers on what we're expecting for revenue off the hotel, and I don't know if this is like a trade secret or if you guys can share what your specs are. Do you know what occupancy rate you're expecting?
well, the occupancy rate is on our pro forma, which you should have that, and it varies between. Well, we figured it between probably 65 up to 90% is on the pro forma.
Doesn't the pro forma say 90%?
I would just take all that with a grain of salt. I mean, I
Right.
would advise you to be conservative, especially the first year when we ramp up.
Okay. No, that's helpful.
Because we can't really tell how fast we're going to ramp up.
When you did the Spring Hill, how long did it
Spring Hill
take
took
to?
us about 6 to 8 months before we hit where we wanted to be, and we had a lot of competition out there that we didn't expect. I mean, we had a Fairfield opened up, and the Home 2 opened up the same time we did. And even though we got a great location here, we still have a lot of hotels. And the Drury is just getting ready to open. That's a 180-room hotel in Coralville. 2 or 3 more are downtown Iowa City. So, like I say, we can predict, but I would
Yeah.
err on the conservative side.
Okay, and what's your average room rate?
Our average room rate should be between 100 and 120,
Okay.
and we might go as high as 130 or 140.
Okay.
Again, it's just kind of an unknown.
Keep it conservative. All right.
I
I have
see.
a question for you. Do you participate with any of your existing hotels with a STAR report?
Yeah, we use the STAR report, and last I checked the STAR report, we were somewhere the average. If everybody was on an even keel, it would be 55% occupancy.
Okay,
So that's why I'd be conservative. Just,
sure.
I think this one is going to do the best of any hotel we've ever had, but again, a lot of competition out there, so there's a lot of unknowns.
Okay.
Oh,
Are you going to advertise or promote this hotel?
yeah, we'll be very aggressive because we're not taking anything for granted. I mean, we're already contacted university, the athletic department, the hospital, the pharmacy, and we'll have our feelers out to all of those people. We've got real good feedback from them. They're all waiting, for that to open up because they want to be first in line if there's any rooms to rent. So I think we're going to have a real good rapport with the university and the athletic department both. So, but again, we're going to be aggressive because there's so much competition out there right now. So, and the other thing though that I want to talk about was Triangle Park. I'd just like to put that on the agenda for next month if we could, where I could get together with some of you maybe beforehand, and we could just take a look at that plan again and get together with Dottie.
We meet later on, we meet on January the 15th this week, if you wanted to maybe talk to us
Okay.
then as well.
If it-
Well, that's specifically for the Swisher track,
Could we
and
start an hour earlier, amend the agenda for, 45 minutes earlier?
Hear very well.
oh,
well,
You're talking about Triangle Park.
Right, and I'm so sorry. Jim is requesting that council revisit this issue in February. I'm just thinking that's way too long between now and February, and the next opportunity that council meets is January 15th. So I'm thinking, why don't we front-load half an hour, 45 minutes before the public meeting on Swisher? Of course, keep it open keep an open meeting, but just.
Let me meet with Jim and decide, because we've got some issues that we need to resolve before we bring it to council. Okay.
yeah, that's fine, Dottie. I'll meet with you first, and then we'll decide what we want to do on setting it for the council agenda.
Yeah, okay.
I
All
guess
right.
my interest is, I just don't want this dragging on.
I agree.
Triangle Park has had more
Well, and Dottie and I-
prime time than anything else.
Yeah, and right now, the reason I want to push it right now is because we can get the best bids if we do it during the winter.
Perfect.
And-
Let's not drag it
so,
on. Let's
okay.
make this happen.
I just, yeah, okay, so I'll work.
Thank you.
I'm not
I'll work it
I'm
out with
just-
Dottie, though.
Is there anything else that they wanted to ask, Jim? Okay, thank you so much. And then
All right.
hand Dottie back. Don't forget. And then we'll go on to streets and sidewalks, Dottie. And is it okay if Josiah starts?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I constructed a letter and gave it to him, and he edited it, and we're going to send it out to the persons that have already been contacted about the sidewalks for this year, so he can explain the rest of it.
Thank you. Okay, Josiah.
Dottie, I'm just handing out an updated set of plans for Olive Court to everyone. Do you want me to stick that in your mailbox here?
Yeah, I have a copy.
Okay, this would be updated for today, so I'll put that in your mailbox.
Oh, okay.
Thanks. Okay, so I submitted a written report, and there's a couple items I wanted to talk about as far as if we can get some direction tonight or find out what questions there are, what we need to answer to get that
You have
direction.
to talk in the microphone,
Sorry,
too. Sorry.
phone and the microphone. The first thing is, we just talked about the sidewalk repair project and the letter Dottie was talking about. So I've got that draft of that letter, and we're going to send it out to everybody probably next week, letting them know that, as I understand it, the required repairs have been postponed for 2019, and that's what the letter essentially says, and that the council is going to review the scope and the process of how they're going to handle sidewalk repairs, and at that time they'll discuss the timeline for the future timeline for getting sidewalks repaired. And so to that end, I just want to also confirm we're not going to gather a city administered sidewalk repair project at all this year in 2019. I just want to confirm that that's your intent as well.
Correct.
Yes, okay. The second thing I wanted to talk about was the Olive Court project and the memo I sent out on design widths. It's a follow-up from last month's meeting about how narrow can we make the street, essentially, and how do you make those decisions on what those widths are. So I did send out that memo, and basically the summary is that we've been showing it at 23 after all the people we talked to and the research. We recommend you stay at 23, or at the very minimum, you could go down to 22 feet and still basically maintain the unobstructed fire access width. And then the other portion of that is the sidewalks. We're showing 5-foot walks new on both sides. The existing are 4, and as you can see in that memo, technically you can go with 4. So those are the two questions I would ask you guys, if you could provide direction or what else I could do to help make you feel comfortable making a decision.
I'd prefer to take up your offer on the 22-foot street, and I'm okay with the 5-foot sidewalks.
Is someone talking?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, let me restate that. I would prefer to go with the 22-foot wide street, and I think the 5-foot sidewalks are fine.
Does anyone else want to discuss? We could put that in the form of a motion.
So moved?
Second.
So moved by Virginia, second by Nick. Any further discussion?
I thought I read in the, in your memo, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it was important to keep standardization of the streets, because 22 is out of standard, but 23 is what you recommended as a minimum. of non-standard. Is that correct? Did I understand that?
Yeah, so Sylvia asked a question about the memo and sort of what was standard design widths. So the memo points out that those SUDAS design standards actually say the minimum, two things. They break down the components of a project, like the street widths, the curb and gutter, the sidewalks. And if you just add those up and you see the minimum acceptable, it's 23 feet. Okay. But then if you look at the overall street width, they say, well, we just recommend 26 is the narrowest street in general for standardization. It's related to like on-street parking width and things like that. And that being said, I also pointed out the design manual explicitly says, you know, not every project's the same. You got to make some adjustments. And so for this particular street in this part of the world at this time, which is what we're doing, that's why I'm saying I'm recommending the 23 is still suitable, even though it is less than what they say is the sort of the standard minimum street width.
Okay. But that's your engineering opinion that it should be 23 as opposed to 25, but not as low as 22.
Yeah. Let me answer it this way. We could make it as wide as you want, within reason. My understanding from everything I've heard is that there's an interest in trying to make this street, you know, have sidewalks, have street, have slow traffic, have trees, and so in the interest of balancing those, that's why I'm saying I think you can do the 23
And achieve all those
and
other-
achieve those goals and meet the basically and still meet the fire access or the 22 minimum.
Okay. And I'm concerned about fire and access. And if 23 gets us fire and access and balancing out those other factors.
Are we giving our opinion?
Yeah, we're doing discussion. So Virginia, do you
So
want to
twen-
amend
so
your
tw-
motion to 23, which is 1 foot more?
I don't.
23 is what we're showing. It provides that fire access. 22 is the narrowest. I'm going to recommend you go so you can still provide that fire access width.
Okay.
So
I prefer a 23-foot street and a 5-foot sidewalk.
The council's been discussing the motion, Dottie, is for 22 feet wide, the minimum, which is still provides fire access.
23 for the street.
I'm
Not
just telling you what the-
22 is too narrow, I believe.
yeah, Louise is pointing out the current motion on the table is 22 street and 5-foot walks. And I believe we're in discussion right now.
Okay.
Your report says that it's a.
The reason
Your report talked about it being a loop
23,
street. This is considered a loop street.
Josiah, is that to give a little more freedom for emergency vehicles?
Dottie, the 23 was based on adding up sort of the minimum widths of all the street components, and it all adds up to 23. Further research shows that 22 will still get you that fire access, and so that was how we got to that question, 22 and 23. What's that, Nick?
Your memo had talked about it distinguishing between a loop street and not a loop street.
Yeah.
This would be considered a loop street. Is that correct?
So that language, that was from my discussion with the MPO with Kent Ralston. His reference was there to the Iowa City subdivision ordinances. So they have what they define as a loop street, and I showed what that was. And his thought was, given Olive Court's, low density character, it'd probably be similar. And so that's another area where that 22 pops up, because for that type of street in Iowa City, they will allow 22.
Is there any further discussion? Now, this is a vote, Dottie, for the street to be 22 feet wide and the sidewalk 5 feet wide. Did you hear me? That's the motion in the second, for 22 feet wide street and 5 feet wide sidewalk. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
I
Aye.
All opposed, say no.
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 Okay, it carries 3-2. Okay, Josiah.
Okay, well, those are the three things I wanted to get your thoughts and dimensions on. I guess so. Then our next submittal deadline is 100% set in February, and more current than that is around January 11th. At the end of the week, we're supposed to hear back if the funding application was accepted to go to like the full review. So I'll update everybody at that time as
Well,
soon as
best
we
of
hear.
luck. Yeah.
Can I just make a comment of what I'm looking at on this first page here? We've got 3 crabapple trees that are shown to be saved. And across the street, there's one more that's shown to be saved. And I told your assistant at the public meeting that this next one down should also be offered to the homeowner as an option to be saved. And I just want to make sure that all of these should be optional to the homeowner. The homeowners may not want to save those trees. What we need to do is check in with them and see if they want them preserved or removed and replaced. Does that make sense?
I'll follow up with you on that particular
Before- yeah.
property that you were mentioning.
I'd like to see some of that ribboning around the trees so that people have a visual reminder of what trees will be removed, so there are no surprises or someone forgetting to communicate with you or anybody else.
Like prior to the work being done. Is what you're
Right.
saying.
Kind of like
Yeah.
what we did for the hotel where bright yellow
Yeah.
indicated something.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. No more questions for Josiah? Okay, thank you. Thanks for attending the meeting, Josiah.
Thanks for signing.
Now we'll go to the mayor's report, and first of all, I have a consideration of Resolution 1901, ratifying the mayor's appointments to the Zoning Commission and Board of Adjustment, and that's
I motion adoption.
okay. Motion by Sylvia,
Second.
second by Virginia. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No, it's a resolution. Sorry. Roll call vote.
Miller,
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Herbold,
Aye.
Maher. We're voting on the tree and Board of Adjustment vote.
Zoning Commission.
Zonings, sorry.
You're voting on the mayor's recommendations?
Correct.
Aye.
Okay. And Casada.
Aye.
Carried.
Thank you. And I wanted to tell the public that I have 3 open positions for the tree board. And so please contact me if you're interested.
Can you give
I-
us a little overview of what the responsibilities would entail?
Well, I think our
Overseeing
arborist,
spring
who used to be chair,
planting.
can do it.
Overseeing spring planting and arranging for tree removal contracts.
And I also want to thank Jim Bradley and David Giese and Mark Sherrod for volunteering to serve on the tree board. And then every year since I've been mayor, I've done my mayor's MVPs every January. And this time, once again, I want to recognize Scott and Carol Ann Christensen and Pat Yagi for their work on the city garden. As I said in my report, every year it's more and more beautiful. They do such a nice job. It's all done with their volunteer hours and with people who want to donate to them. So I encourage everyone to donate and to them. And Pat, I'm glad you're here today. Would you come up? And I have a little gift certificate for each of you to thank you. Thanks so much, Pat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate your compliments. I haven't been to a meeting for a while. Please don't think I came just to get these awards. Carolyn and I had coffee today. We're already getting excited about the next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. And that's all I have. If there's any questions, we'll go on to the legal report.
I don't have anything to add to my written report unless there are questions.
Okay, we'll go on to the clerk's report. Chris Anderson.
Sorry, too many things going on at once. I also don't have anything to add, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you'd like. I will say one thing, I guess I do have one thing to add. The city examination went very well.
Thank you for all your
Thank
work
you
on
for
that.
knowing that.
Yes, thank you, Chris, for all your hard work.
And the treasurer's report, the warrants are before you. And as Josiah said in his report, there was that $1,600 from that sidewalk curb repair also is included in there. Is there any objections to paying the bills? Hearing none, the bills would be paid by unanimous consent. Okay, we'll go on to finance, and Sylvia, you're going to discuss the budget.
Yep. And Chris, if you can help me pull up the report I sent, that way we can just walk through.
Sylvia, I can't hear her.
Maybe we'll pass it to Sylvia.
All right. All right, well, I want to start off by saying let's acknowledge that a lot of work is taking place right now behind the scenes. I want to thank staff and counselors who are, back from their new year vacations or parties, and they're diving right back into budget and numbers. Many of which have been asked to not just provide budget numbers this year, but also to provide trending information to help counselors make a decision over services provided over the course of several years. I think that's helpful information for us to have. It gives us an opportunity to see where there might be outlier years versus consistent years, and also correction years. Anyhow, I'm not going to go any further other than to thank individuals who have not told me that they won't provide the information. So our budget must be filed by March 15th of 2019. And I want to keep us all in mind that there is a publication requirement that we have to plan for in advance. All right, the first topic that I want to start off with is that we have a fiduciary obligation at all times when dealing with or negotiating with taxpayer dollars. And with that in mind, I've been reviewing the budget with that eye. So for legal services tonight, I've already had a discussion by phone with Steve Ballard. It was a good discussion. I think it was a healthy discussion. Nothing personal, just business. And there are a couple of areas that we need to address tonight for purposes of providing guidance. One of the things that I realized is that our city attorney fees are not benchmarking as competitive with other cities who are in similar size, slightly a little bit larger, but what can we do? And they have at least one big revenue-producing entity. I looked at Hills, I looked at Riverside, and I looked at West Branch. And West Branch is a flat fee service city, and meaning that they pay a flat fee of about $1,000 per month for legal services. Whereas Riverside and Hills have approximately $125 for legal services per hour by a partner. In the law firm structure, you have partners, you have senior associates, and you have entry-level attorneys as, associates or just attorneys. So I just wanted to note and bring that to your attention under item number 1. Item number 2 is legal invoice descriptions are not providing customary billing rate and time spent on a matter, or providing indication as to who directs the request for legal services. So I am asking particularly tonight, with a very specific focus, that we as counselors provide consensus direction to include the legal invoices, to have these 2 additional factors, which is we need to know how much time was spent on that matter, and number 2, we need to know the pro rata cost of that matter. So if something took an entire hour, then I would assume we would see a charge for 1 hour's worth of billable work. And if it took a half an hour, then we would see half of what the billable rate is. I do want to tell this council and the public that this is customary. It's nothing unusual. And I was quite pleased to see that other cities are receiving this type of format for their legal services. So I don't think it's extraordinary. So if I can please have consensus direction to include these. It's my understanding that this wouldn't be asking Steve's firm to go out and purchase technology to accomplish. So if we can standardize to best practices, I would appreciate that tonight. So I'm making a motion right now. Is there a second?
So can you clarify the motion a little
Yeah.
more?
The motion reads, request to city attorney to include in billing invoices amount of time spent and rate associated with that time.
Request for,
That's reasonable practices.
That's correct. That's very similar to.
Yeah, I would approve that. I would expect that being done.
so is that a second, Dottie?
Been done.
That's a second by Dottie.
Yes,
I
it's
take that as a
and I
second.
think we're in discussion already.
Okay. Further discussion?
I'm sorry, can you just read the motion to me one more time?
Request to the city attorney to include in the billing invoices the amount of time spent and the rate for that time.
Right. In addition to everything else he's already doing.
I guess my feedback would be, in terms of the issues with the city attorney's office, we got this report at 2 o'clock today. I have not had any problems with how the city attorney has operated. He has been giving, I think, a very reasonable rate for his services, considering what he could get in his private practice work. I just don't see any reason to change what has been occurring so far.
Nick, don't you see that it would make a difference as to which practitioner reviewed the material? Now, if Steve reviews everything, that's another matter. But, if one of the associates or someone lesser in terms of pay grade are doing it, then we should be paying accordingly.
That's right, and that's one of the other issues under miscellaneous with Steve that I discussed, and that is that his pay scale that he reported in, I believe, the October legal report, does not provide us with a hierarchy of payments. So it's customary, and Nick, maybe in your law firm, you may not have this distinction, I don't know, but in all of the law firms that I supervise to provide assistance in specialized matters, we have partner levels, senior associate levels, and what I call lovingly baby attorneys, brand new attorneys. And they're all charged differently. So my expectation.
Different rates, but if Steve reviews everything at the end, that's another story. But if he's just sending it down to someone else to do it, that we shouldn't be paying for his rate.
So did either of you read Steve's email and his attachments? Because I think that explains it fairly well, and I agree with what Nick said.
I have a concern about that policy. Lisa, I read the legal report because that's where I get, I get my legal advice or basis for municipal legal action. But when I'm looking at a bill for $27,000, $365.70 not too long ago, and I start looking at the invoice and reading, I have no clue as to which of these subject matters were so important that they took up this amount of money and how many people may have been involved. So, I know how many people were involved. I just don't know how significant of a critical issue was it. Did it take 10 minutes? Did it take 10 hours? Did it take 10 days? Did it take 10 months? I have no idea what the taxpayer of University Heights is being asked to pay for. And all I'm asking is for additional clarity so that any member of council or member of the public has an opportunity to gauge just how much we're spending on issues. That's all. Has nothing to do with adding more work to the law firm. As a matter of fact, I think at this time it would be appropriate to ask, Steve, does your technology allow you to add the fields for time spent, and does it allow you to add the fields for how much that subject matter, whatever action was taken cost?
I think so.
You think so? So it's an affirmative. Would it be costing you or the city any more money to add 2 additional pieces of information for the sake of public disclosure into an invoice?
No, it wouldn't be an expense, no.
It would not be an expense. Would it be problematic? Would it require administratively hiring another person to manage this information?
I don't think so, no.
You don't think so? Okay.
As I've said many, many times, however the council wants.
Sylvia, just ask Steve if he's comfortable billing that way.
Yes, he just has said he is, and unfortunately, he was not on the microphone, so I will ask him to please repeat what he can do.
Yeah, so we can build the city the way the city wants to be built. I've said that many times over the years, and I'll say that again tonight. So.
Right. So I just didn't think this even needed council action other than to let you know it's happening. So can you reconsider, Nick?
I'm simply, as I said, we got this at 2 o'clock today. I think that the bills, considering how much time we have asked of Steve and his office, we've had these long meetings. Many of them, we've asked his office to do tasks that are not necessarily even legal in nature, like sending mail out, having the addresses for the city. I'm just not, between 2 o'clock and now, I'm not in the position to vote on something that would change status quo, because I think you got to be careful what you wish for. I mean, with the rates that I have seen so far, they're below what I would consider the typical market rate in this industry. I mean, I think that the hourly rates have been low. We've had a lot of time that I'm assuming is being generously written off. I don't know fully, but it seems pretty conservative to me. So, I mean, if you're asking to request that he go to the traditional way of billing for legal services, my guess is that his rate would be higher. Even his associates would potentially be higher than the $200 rate. So that's why I'm saying I'm just not in the position to support asking for any change right now. Again, since we got this report at 2 o'clock, this is not sufficient time to be, I think, changing anything like this. I just don't want to, I mean, there's probably, as Steve pointed out in his correspondence to council, there are reasons why we are where we are right now, and I guess I'm just not in the position to change something at this point.
I just want to remind you that it was just 2 months ago in November when council received from the chief of police a report regarding Caltrans that was pretty late in the day, yet we were all required to take an action that evening because the representative, was it the month before? Yeah, okay, the month before we received it pretty late in the day as well, but we all took a healthy step in the right direction to buy time for Nate to get us additional information from Caltech the following council meeting. So right now, the comparison that I'm making about your analysis, Nick, is that you're willing to not benchmark to a good disclosure practice on behalf of the taxpayer.
I mean, part of what you're doing right now and talking and talking and talking is costing the city money. When you narrate for hours on end, this is what costs us money. If we can just...
Don't interrupt me. That's what's costing money. I was speaking.
Well, if I don't interrupt you, you will talk for a long period of time.
Okay,
so I'm not ready to vote. You can talk to the other counselors. I'm not ready to vote in favor of your motion right now.
I'd like to have a benchmark of, do you need more time?
Yes.
Okay, then I will table this for next month, and I will bring you with specific information from other towns to see how they're benchmarking with just the format. This is all we're asking is a disclosure on format. All right.
You're rescinding your motion.
I am, no, it was, whose motion? Yes, I am rescinding my motion, tabling it, right. Actually, I'm tabling it for next council meeting. All right, so I do want to remind everyone, in particular, all of us counselors who are sitting at the table along with the mayor, that as of January 7th, the total legal service budget is already over budget. It's at 157.9%, with general government legal services at 207.4%. So spillage is already there, and we are only halfway into the budget year. So Nick, that is why, another reason why we need to have a little bit more of disclosure so we can better gauge things.
If I may remind you, there will be a reimbursement at the end of the fiscal year
From whom?
from the development team.
For how much so far?
I honestly couldn't tell you that.
That's
You're
right.
the finance chair.
We're tracking it, and
And how much of that is due to the 29 meetings that we had last year that have gone on for hours and hours at a time?
Well,
Also.
and two, there have been a lot of issues that have been dealt with, and to say that it's the city attorney's fault rather than counselors who potentially, start issues that we have to deal with the press and otherwise, these things are expensive. So legal services are a matter of time, and if we want to reduce our costs, I think one thing we can do is really focus on not using as much legal services. I'm happy to look at the details of the rest of it, but I think that needs to be emphasized.
I think I need to emphasize that the request for counsel has nothing to do with stopping the use of city attorney's time. It is better disclosure. That's all it's about. There's nothing to be confounded with the fact that we do need a city attorney to help us out for whatever needs to be addressed. But all I'm asking, and the public should be aware, is for further disclosure on the invoices. Nothing to do with time and nothing to do with issues. All right, I do want to
Which budget item is this? Or, I'm sorry, which agenda item?
No, it's a budget report, and because the budget is in spillage right now.
I don't
I'm
see what
bringing
we're
this up.
discussing right now on the agenda.
All right, so the police department, I met with the UHPD police chief over his budget, and it's my understanding that he is moving on to version 2. So until we have a version 2, I will withhold meeting with Nate.
Version 2, if you'd like it to
I would,
tonight.
thank you. I'll withhold meeting with, I'll follow up with the meeting with Nick, because there are some policy issues that I think need to be discussed and brought back to the council. In particular, I want to make it very clear that I've spoken to the chief, and I strongly support having a small, well-paid, professional staff of police officers, and I am very concerned with the trend in the last 5 years or so where we keep adding a 5th additional officer, and of course that raises other concerns. But at this time, I'm looking and I'm making full disclosure to my council peers that the way I'm looking at the PD budget is with a sensible approach that our city, which is only less than a square mile worth of coverage and has a different risk and crime profile, is exceeding federal benchmarks for what a city our size has in terms of police officers.
I think when we have a hotel operating in town, we are clearly, I think when we have a hotel operating in town, we are clearly going to want 24-hour coverage, and this is you can't cover 24 hours with less than 5 people. It's not physically possible.
I can't hear worth a darn.
Okay,
We're
so
getting
I
a
will
lot of noise
I will
from you,
postpone
Dottie.
this budget item until February so we can have
I'm not doing
Well,
anything.
since you brought up version 2, just that got distributed, you'll see, we decided the Keltec and the salaries issues. Nate has worked really hard to make drastic cuts in other areas. You'll see, down 20%, 16%, 14%, 50%, some areas. So the idea is that, to have a functioning police department, we believe we have to have the technology, the vehicles, the staff salaries that we've talked about. Otherwise, I think he's done really well in terms of shrinking the other items in his budget. I think that the discussion we had was basically, if he can get us, in my opinion, kind of a bare bones budget on these other items, the decision for council really is, are we ready to pass a bare bones budget? That might mean, if office supplies come back higher than his bare bones budget, are we going to be understanding? Because he is coming with, outside of the Keltec and the salaries, really bare bones stuff. Maybe council will decide, hey, we don't want to bother with this again. We want to give him a little bit more cushion. I think that's the option that council has, and I guess our work has just been talking about that general policy distinction. Do we want to potentially have him coming back, or would we rather, you know, have a little cushion? What the version 2, my understanding is this is the bare bones, you know, what we think we can get by on, understanding that, you know, there's a chance that there may be some, you know, some approaching council to ask for, you know, some additional discretionary money in the future.
Okay, so with that in mind, I will be meeting with you, Nick, to follow up on some policy issues related to the budget. All right, so the next one is I continue to review other budget areas, and will provide you all updates with that, because I think it's valuable that you hear back from a different perspective. Okay, going into the collecting hotel motel taxes, I discovered in December of 2018 that there was a little bit of a hiccup with the reporting of the referendum the initiative that took place in the November 2017 election. The Iowa Department of Revenue has since reached out to the appropriate county representatives and obtained the file and all the necessary work, so we're moving forward. But I do want to caution this council that as we move into any planning, we recognize that there might be an off chance that we can't start collecting cash until January 1st of 2020 versus possibly collecting cash as early as December 2019. But you can read all about it. The next part is projection of future income from the hotel. So the hotel is anticipated to project at least 2 streams of revenue. One of them is more immediate than the other, and the more immediate one, actually the least immediate one, is your first table, which is the hotel property taxes. Because Iowa law prohibits the release of 2018 rates used until later in March of 2019, I had to go back and work with the appraisal office with 2017 values. So that's one of the footnotes that you have to keep in mind. These values could change, but nonetheless, they're conservative, and we've kept them at not low, but somewhere in the median, so that we could have some something to work with. At the end of the day, I wouldn't expect generally that any of these values would drop, meaning that if we estimate 30,000, I don't believe that this property would get us down into 20,000. So if anything, we might have
I don't understand this. What, 30,000 what?
Estimated property value and commercial value. So let me walk you through it. Right now, payments that you see on September 2018 and March 2019, those are the taxable assessment portions for residential assessment in 2017. So the county assessment bill is always like almost a year and a half in arrears. Mm-hmm. It's not quite tracking at all our own fiscal calendar. It goes from January to December, so that adds a little nuance to it. And number 2, it takes almost a year and a half to apply.
It's 18
and that's
months
what,
before.
and that's why I added for every payment that you would expect.
What is 4840? 4,000.
4840 is right now, if you go onto the assessor's webpage, that is the payment that is due for for March of 2019, which is coming up in our fiscal budget. Our budget will be receiving $4,840.
That's the total property taxes being generated by the site. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, for
okay, so that's the
rate
property
year,
taxes for the Flom house, basically.
Right, and then look at the next column.
Uh-huh.
It says estimated city share.
Yep.
Because this is property taxes, it is being shared with the county, schools, and any other local agencies. So I've given us an outline or a map of what's going to happen in 2018 residential rates, which right now are pretty much sealed until later in March of this year. Okay. We can expect the first payment to not really change because there was still a home, it's still residential. So that entire year, 2018, is expected to be all residential. And look at the fiscal years it's hitting for the budget. It's 2019 and 2020, 2019 and 20. So it's it's the same fiscal year. And that's the one that we're planning for now. So Virginia,
so
to answer one of your questions, what's the estimated property? We're still stuck with residential property rates of 4,840 down to 1,613 after all distributions are made.
But can't you take the current commercial rate and multiply that by
You will, but you're not going to be able to
the
do that
expected
until-
property
well,
value.
that's what they've done
I
already
mean,
in January
to give
1.
us a rough idea, right?
Yeah, and that rough idea doesn't materialize into cash until September 2020.
So is that rough idea listed on here somewhere?
You mean the calculation?
Yeah.
No, but I can send it to you.
What is it?
The commercial we used, okay, so footnote number 2 says that we use the athletic club for a comparable for commercial land only. We don't have any other sales.
I don't care what
to
the
look at.
commercial, I don't care what it's going to be in the interim. I want to know what we expect it to be when it's done.
I can't, the assessor doesn't have an idea of what's done. Right now, snapshot of January 1st of 2019 is commercial land only. They can't envision a building on it yet. They can't assess what's not
But what
there
I'm
yet.
saying is, can't you take the expected value, which is from the pro forma,
Mhm.
and multiply that by the commercial rate to get a
You know
rough
what?
estimate,
couldn't
which I
get-
understand is
the
rough.
assessor had their own way of providing a formula, what they felt comfortable with, and this chart was actually circulated. So I'm not going to touch any other values because I think it would be speculative, and I don't want to introduce so much speculation into the city budget that we crash and then have to go out and levy our property owners to make up for gaps that were not calculated. So, but to answer your question, your best bet, we're going to find out a little bit more information March of 2019 just to account for that commercial land only rate. But 2020 is when they will actually go back and look at the land plus the build out. And that's what it means. It's the building. It's what you want, which is the pro forma calculations, except it's kosher per the assessor's rules for assessments. And that's why I put TBD. I didn't want to speculate as to what that could look like
So you'll
because
have
it's
that in
outside.
March.
Hmm?
You'll have that in March?
I don't know if we'll be able to pull those values to reach to 2020 because 2020 is commercial plus build out. And I can't project that far. And also, it's not relevant to the fiscal year that we'd be working for. Look at the fiscal years that you'd be getting payout
Yeah,
for.
I understand.
So
Okay.
for me, I figured it's a low priority in terms of dollars. I think this council should care about the assessment year 2017, 2018, and 2019 because those hit the budgets that we're trying to anticipate for. So revenue there, unfortunately, is not as high for the first property, which makes sense because there's this 18-month delay. But the next table, Chris, is the one that has the most useful information for budget planning, but it has the same characteristics as the longer-term property values, and that is that it's a little bit more speculative. We had to draw a reasonable conclusion based on best available information. So what does that mean? That meant that I had to work with obtaining something called the STAR report, which is used by hotels throughout the nation. It is a trending and reporting company, and Johnson County participates in many of the hotels that are in Johnson County, and you heard from the developer tonight that they do participate in the STAR reporting agency. They provide trending information, which is in for a number of factors, many of which we need to calculate cash projections. So for example, occupancy rates, that is included in the STAR report. Room rates are included in the STAR report, and from that you can plug in a couple of formulas, or actually these values, to generate different formulas. So did you have an opportunity, counselors, to look at the range of occupancy rates and room rates trending? I included that in that first box. Okay. Knowing that, I figured it would be prudent to probably go with an occupancy rate of 60% because the hotel is going to be open for just 6 months, and it's in half of our fiscal year. So
I think that's a good
I didn't want
assumption.
to go any more aggressive. Room rate 90, and the period was January and June, just in case we can't collect in December. And with that alone, it was an estimated revenue base of about $95,256 at a 7% hotel room rate. So I broke that down into the two buckets that Iowa hotel and motel tax law provide, and we are directed to split that amount of money into the two boxes that you have. And the first box is $47,628, and that amount of money is controlled by the voters. Voters told us in November of 2017 how council must appropriate that money, so I broke it down for you. 90% has got to be used, 90% of the 3.5% has to be used for neighborhood housing and infrastructure, revitalization, including road repairs, neighborhood stabilization, and parkland or green space acquisition, maintenance, and operation. The next one is 10% must be used for any lawful purpose of that 3.5%. So then the following half of the motel taxes, 3.5%, and that's $47,628, and that is controlled by Iowa Code 427A.7, and that's pretty much what we can sum up for recreation, leisure, and tourism and promotion. So I carried over the language of 427A so that we can have it for discussion and not lose track of what it means. I think the city budget is served well for this upcoming fiscal cycle if we allow the hotel to have a baseline budget year. I think trying to rely heavily on 6 months of hotel revenue is I think the hotel will do well, but I'm just still concerned that it might be setting us up for some shortfalls later on if indeed all this competition is thriving around us and the market doesn't respond the way we anticipated in the first 6 months. So I just caution the rest of you, especially the majority voting, to ensure that you're not aggressive in your values, because the short of it is taxpayers have to increase. We have to increase our taxes for that, and I don't want to be a part of that. So I agree that there's a need for nonpartisan prioritizing with the few 6 months of any initial hotel motel taxes. I think our community is served when we use tools that are neutral and impartial, such as the 2017 Vision Community Report, which identified a number of areas that the council's budget could start addressing once money became available. This report doesn't have to control the conversation, but it's a good starting point that's neutral and nonpartisan. Any questions on this segment? I think this is okay. Moving on, Swisher Track. I was asked to bring up some information on a schedule for a general obligation for $555,000.
That's later on in the agenda.
What?
That's later on in the agenda.
No, this is still budget.
It's next in her report.
This is still budget.
Oh,
And
the
I think-
55.
Can I just ask a question? We can use,
I
in your
saw that.
opinion, may we use the portion of the hotel tax revenue that is for acquisition of sites, blah, 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 to pay off the bond on Swisher?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we're counting on
Okay.
that after year 3. So, and that's why I included
Great.
the Swisher Track Bond Initiative, because
Right, I saw that.
there was a little bit of a snafu there.
So it can be property that we already have acquired. It doesn't have to be new acquisitions of property.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
That's-
Can I interject one thing?
Please.
So when I was looking into the hotel motel tax, I spoke with the Iowa Department of Revenue, and they told me it was distributed on a quarterly basis. And I just brought up there, did you say that it's only distributed January and June?
No, they onboard you into the distribution program.
Okay, so you're getting it then the next quarter for the previous quarter. I just want to make
haven't even
sure.
got- you know what? I didn't even go into the scheduling of payouts. The first thing that we care about is when can we start collecting hotel motel revenue?
Correct.
So we could either start this year in I think July 1, if the new director of the IDR agrees that are late reporting to them is still meritorious to let us on into July 1. If on the off chance they say no, then our first dollar or dime that we collect on hotel motel tax is January 1, 2020.
But do you know if they're opening the hotel early, say 2 floors are done and they're going to open up for the football season?
I don't know that from Jim. We can ask. So this starts the conversation and we can figure it out. But also keep in mind, they're starting sometime in December, well after football game day. And looking at the STAR report information that I provided early
It's my understanding that they hope to be open this fall,
well then,
coming up.
Well,
Then
that's
let's
their
hope-
dream.
Right.
that's their dream.
So that's,
But
and I understand, but I'm just wondering if they're going to have a portion of the hotel open and then finish as they're going on.
That's a great question. I'll find out. All right, so then Swisher
yeah,
Track.
find that.
Because of the question as to what our debt obligation for Swisher Track would look like now that we changed it to $500,000 approximately, I went looking for information and I realized that I didn't have the final schedule for payments. So I reached out to Lisa Moore for information as to whether or not she had it. And Lisa, I don't know if you got my email, so I'm kind of wondering if the Gmail system is working or not.
It's on the website.
We have it.
Oh, you
It's
do?
passed out.
Okay.
It's passed out July 10th, 2018, and
Okay, that makes
it is
sense.
on the website.
Okay, because apparently okay, good. So I didn't find it on the website. Is it under the Swisher Track?
So it's this page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it under the?
It is, yes, it's on there now.
Okay, so you've already uploaded it. Thank you. Okay, so so I requested a copy and I attached it to this report, but I don't have it in my PDF file that I submitted to the clerk. So my apologies. You can get it from Lisa. The one thing I did want to point out to counselors is that when I reviewed the final payout schedule for the 555, it alarmed me to see that it was not addressing full use of the lost proceeds. At all times, lost has got to be used year 1, year 2, and year 3. We have a payment coming up in June of this year, and we have no other cash other than lost. And the way that schedule was projecting out, it projected revenue in a slightly different way. And that's the colorful one. That's the one with the tricolors that Lisa was holding up. So I want to remind this council that the larger sums of GO bonding schedules that I helped develop or put together with Maggie Spears early on, at all times envisioned year 1 payments, year 2 and 3 to be made from proceeds of loss, just because 1, we don't have the hotel up and running this year, and 2, we may not have enough funds to come up with the next payment, which is $68,000 or so that are due. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I'm going to request a revised schedule from Spears in order to ensure that we're all working with the most current version. So that's what I'm
So
doing.
that those first few payments are fully covered by the lost money.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And so that also relieves the, the hotel, motel money to be used somewhere else. So anyhow, Part 5 is nothing more than city debt, reminding you how much we're carrying. We're carrying about $1.7 million.
Can you provide a breakdown of what the 1.2 million is? Like what projects make up that?
Yeah, actually, we can find that in the Treasury report. I think, where's the Treasury report from Lori? It's always, I think it's, nope, she's not here. I think it's included, or at least maybe I'm just looking at other reports. But yeah, that there is, I want to say that there's a debt carrying schedule there, because we have to pay about 10% or so of annual debt in various payments. So I can share that with the council and help you figure out how to do it on your own going forward.
Thanks.
But we have another CD that has matured. It's for $30,414 under Part 6, and it needs action tonight. The city treasurer provided a summary in her January 2019 report, and I brought an electronic copy of that chart with Chris because my printer was not working.
You know, those are always an agenda item. That's not on the agenda. Steve, does that need to be an agenda item? We could put it with the meeting on the 15th and make it into a special meeting and then close it and do a work session.
It should only take more than 5 minutes if we do it this Thursday because the research is done.
We'll put it on the January 15th agenda as a
fine.
special meeting.
That's fine.
Thank you.
So that is the budget, and just a reminder, turnaround time so that we can get a version 1 of the city budget sometime late December, and by February have somewhat of a final form for the public to start reviewing and providing us with comments and input.
And then February 12th is the next council meeting. And will Steve Cool be coming to that meeting? He usually does to
Possibly,
go
if not, he
through.
can provide us with something in writing.
Okay. And we get all the numbers lined up that night for sure. He has to get the numbers by the end, like you said, the end of January?
No, he has to, we as a city have to file March 15th.
Right.
We have a couple of days of publication requirements, so that means we may have to do a special meeting in early March in order to get the, well, actually, let's see, when do we have our public meeting? Our regularly scheduled meeting?
We have a meeting on February 12th, and the public hearing will be March 12th. And then he'll have time to do that.
I'm not sure, there's a publication requirement somewhere in there.
There is.
There is a
normal-
public hearing
Right.
on March 12th.
On March 12th, okay.
Yeah, you'll get all the numbers on February 12th.
Yeah, so by then, yeah, hopefully we can release, actually not hopefully.
He
in
will give me the
anticipation.
file to publish, and then we'll have a public meeting on that. Obviously, anyone who wants to speak can, and then the council consider the budget at that time and finalize it.
That's right. Okay, yeah, that's how it goes, but
Okay,
February will
good.
be really our first version released to the public for our residents to comment.
Okay.
And that's it.
Any questions for Sylvia? Okay, we'll go on to
Are we not doing 1902?
the what?
Is 1902 deferred?
It's deferred, just because.
Consideration of resolution, that's what I was looking at.
Right, since not everybody's present, I'm just deferring it.
Okay.
until February.
Did
So
you
this-
send that out? I didn't receive a copy.
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. Then we'll go to police chief report. Nate, you circulated a report.
I did. I don't, excuse me, I don't think I have anything to add to my report other than the pizza with the police. I think it's in Nick's report as well. That date was shored up as January 22nd. It sounds like we're going to do 5:30 to 7 that night, and it'll be here at the community center. In addition to that, we'll remind people that night as well. We're going to do, at this point, what I'm going to call community just education night. We're not going to pick a specific topic for the first one. It's just going to be a brief overview of what we have at the department, and the community's invited to come out, ask questions, and just kind of learn about what we do and what we have.
Thank you. I think those are two really nice projects, that you're doing. Do you have any answers yet for Paul Moore?
As far as the football stuff, I'm still working with their.
Okay.
They're in basketball season and wrestling now, so with they still have events that those supervisors that do the football things are working on. So as their schedule and my schedules line up, we're working towards resolving that issue along with the traffic and people getting through town.
We're going to have pizza with police in here.
Correct.
And from Maggie's is going to bring it down. Sounds like
nice.
mostly everybody can make it from the department.
Yeah, we should have everybody there.
And so, chance just for people to get to know the officers, to get to know Nate. Anybody can stop by. We're going to have pizza. Kids are welcome.
Yep.
I would assume they're going to be adhesive badges for kids.
Yeah, we'll have
So
the
it's
badge
highlighter.
stickers.
And just, maybe a little bit more discussion about these meetings that you're talking about for the next year. And then the other thing, did you have anything else?
I do not know. Go ahead.
I just wanted to talk about ordinance 235. I had circulated some minor changes that city attorney had provided, in terms of making it more consistent with other ordinances. Steve, would this mean that we are on first consideration probably?
Yeah, it does. I was going to suggest that if the council desires, it might collapse 1 and 2. The changes that are made they're kind of non-substantive. I don't think there's anything in there that really changes the direction of the ordinance, but there are some changes, so I would suggest that you collapse 1 and 2 if you want tonight to be 2.
I'll motion collapsion.
And I just going to say, I don't have a problem I haven't heard anything about this over the last month. I'd be fine collapsing all 3. I don't know if anybody else has a strong opinion on it.
I think it's an appropriate use of collapsing since it doesn't materially change anything. And I've heard nothing but good praise on behalf of the council work for getting this accomplished. And also, I think people really like that flashing sign out there. And we should have thought about that years ago, not now. So anyhow.
Are you thinking collapsing all 3 or just 2?
No, both, just to keep it on schedule.
Okay.
1 and 2.
Sure.
So do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Nick and second by, was it Sylvia? Okay, and second by Virginia. Okay, so
This is the motion to collapse? Yep.
to collapse 1 and 2.
1 and 2.
Only, okay. Roll call vote.
Moore.
Aye.
Herbold.
Aye.
Maher.
I couldn't hear the motion.
They're voting on collapsing ordinance 235's first and second reading.
Okay, I'll agree.
Casada.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Carried.
Okay, and now, is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion by Virginia, second by Lisa, for resolution.
By Nick.
Oh, Nick. What did I say?
Virginia.
I'm sorry. A roll call vote.
Herbold.
Aye.
Maher.
Dottie,
Casada.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Carried.
I have nothing further.
Any questions for Nick? Okay.
No, I also have gotten a lot of good feedback on that sign placement there. It's a good test to show that that's going to be a useful thing to have. And then we can put the movable one back in other spots.
Okay, Virginia, we have your committee report you circulated, and
Yeah, so we're moving along on a schedule of new revenues. Thank you for your work on that, Sylvia. I do want to know a little bit more about what bonds we have outstanding that could stand to be paid off.
The microphone up.
Oh, sorry. And then the other thing on my mind is that we have this upcoming Melrose Streetscape project in which we're going to need roughly $400,000 cashed to pay for that. So it might be a good idea to be thinking about saving up for that. So I'll move on to talking about housing policy. I think our housing policy is a bit restrictive. We've got a couple properties in town that are for sale right now. And the example that came to my attention most recently is a woman wanted to buy a house in town and live with her boyfriend in the house, but because they are not married, that is prohibited by our housing code. And so the question I have for council tonight is there interest in amending ordinance 110 to read, rather than just the owner's spouse, the children of the owner's spouse, to change that to the owner's spouse or domestic partner, the parents of the owner. I haven't gotten any calls on this one, but I thought I'd throw it in there. The children of the owner and the children of the owner's spouse.
Well, and technically, Steve, is it that it's not really that they're not married, it's just they're not both on the deed, right?
That's right.
Right.
Nice,
So,
yeah.
the one person owns the house. They don't own it jointly, but they are a couple.
I think this issue was brought up initially during the rental housing program, but in the interest of time, we pushed through beyond this, so I think it's an appropriate correction. The only other thing I was thinking is, instead of taking piecemeal rental program issues, let's have another meeting where we just bring all the issues to the table. So let's talk about the complaints that are coming in and review them. I know that Stan's position is that we should let it test out a little longer, but I think we know enough to test out, to address at least the issues that are showing up.
What other complaints are you hearing?
The complaints of the, that I can't sell my home, and now I have to, take a hit because it's not a rental anymore. And so I think this council needs to, reaffirm its commitment to residential character or not.
Okay.
Because some people want the cap lifted, and I just don't think that would be appropriate,
You don't think what would be appropriate?
lifting the cap.
Yeah, I could not hear.
So I think we need to have
Well, we're not
another.
lifting
So,
the cap.
I mean, yeah, I guess if you're not actually interested in taking steps that would deal with those issues, like lifting the cap, then I guess I don't really see the point in having that discussion. But
Well, I think let's bring out all the issues and see, I just don't want us going back and forth on the rental program saying, hey, this changed. Oh, and by the way, another change took place.
Yeah.
Let's hit all of the changes and leave them alone, leave the subject area alone for a year, unless something very big and major shows up.
okay, other opinions?
I don't know that we have other changes to make at this point. I think
We're talking about the rental program. Well, the housing program more
And what other
generally.
changes may be
With
needed.
the exceptions, with the multiple exceptions.
More or less. I don't know. I guess I'm looking at this saying, what's the most conservative move we could take that would offer some appropriate relief, and this is what I came up with.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
I think all of them are meritorious. I think maybe we need to look at reconstructing the ordinance, or so that it incorporates but doesn't definitively identify. Because we have more, we may have more coming down the road. There may be something in the future that we haven't thought about now.
Yeah, I guess Sylvia, I'm not sure that if you're not interested in lifting there are complaints about the rental cap, absolutely. But if you're not interested in lifting the rental cap, then I don't know why you would.
But I am interested in reaffirming our position that it was appropriate.
Okay.
so we don't lift it, that
seems kind of
reaffirms it,
mean,
and
to
we
be
don't need
honest.
to have another meeting.
Fine.
Okay.
Steve, do you have anything to say about this owner-occupied redefinition, since I think we discussed it at least 3 times this past year?
I don't have, if the council desires, if the council desires these changes, I'm happy to draft the ordinance changes to do that. The one question I have, there was a comment about somebody not wanting or thinking that they couldn't sell a home and it wouldn't be a rental any longer. If it's a rental now, it should be able to, the council specifically grandfathered, so to speak, existing rental properties.
Unless it's a 2-year permit.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So anyway.
So I guess, Sylvia, I'm trying to stay focused on what I had
Sounds-
proposed here.
I'm trying to stay focused on what matters. I'm fine with the position. I just don't want residential character to be compromised in any which way. And
I just want to be sure that we don't loosen the rental cap.
Yeah, got it.
Are you concerned about this definition? Is that what you're talking
No,
about?
I'm concerned about piecemeal changes to the zoning ordinance, and so I was just suggesting, for all practicality, let's just bundle up all of our concerns, send them out to the ordinance shop, and make changes and move on. And leave it alone for another round. But
Right.
if there aren't any other issues, I don't think there's an overwhelming need to do that, other than this one, because this one hits up on some residents that I personally know who have family relatives with them, and they aren't on the deed.
Okay. I don't really feel like I'm getting clear direction here, so maybe we'll talk about this next
Actually,
month.
I'm willing to motion that we give direction that this new change go into the ordinance amendment phase. Is there a second for that?
Okay.
For the proposed language to be prepared for.
To add the language to the ordinance for consideration.
That's right.
Second.
Okay, there's a second by Virginia. Dottie, could you
I couldn't hear. What was the motion?
Sylvia has motioned to include new language making reference to the owner's spouse or domestic partner, the parents of the owner, the children of the owner, when we define what a household is in Ordinance 110.
Okay,
Okay, that's your discussion. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Okay, Virginia.
Okay, so now when it comes to the $250,000 generated by the sale of the Olive Court homes, I guess I really want to ratchet this discussion down to one subject tonight, which is that there's a house for sale on Olive Court right now that has a rental permit. It's a duplex. And so that rental permit is going to travel to the new owner of that home.
Just the top.
Correct. Just the top portion of the house. To get underneath our rental cap of 20%, we need to shed a little over 50 rental permits. Why not offer some sort of incentive to the new owners, say $5,000, that if you buy this property and you let the rental permit lapse and restore it to a single family home so it's no longer a duplex, that we will give you down payment assistance of $5,000. I think it meets Sylvia and Dottie's stated goals of keeping the money on Olive Court.
My comment is we just kill it now. We just say if it's for sale, the rental permit dies.
Yeah, that's another alternative.
I'm not in the, there's no reason to give anybody any money. I mean, we want to reduce this to 20%. This is the way you do it. It's tough love, but this is the way you do it.
But we went through this discussion previously, and it was recommended that we wait for a while.
But there's nothing illegal by doing it now and taking that approach, which is that any sales of the property do not extinguish, the sales extinguish the permit.
Hear that? Is someone talking?
That, yes, Lisa Moore is saying that this issue was approached early on and that we had taken a different direction.
Because we were advised to take a different direction and wait and see how this plays out before we...
Why are we waiting? There's no need to wait.
Sorry, I'm not in favor of taking that step right now. So here's an idea. Do you want to try it out? If it doesn't work, if the new owner keeps that rental permit, it doesn't cost us anything. If it does work, I think it was a decent investment. And I think if we're going to get underneath the 20%, it is inappropriate to do it by use of force only. I think we need to offer incentives and use some force for bad property owners.
I didn't hear any of that. But
Steve, do you see any issues with this at all?
the amount
In terms of
rent,
giving money to
then you reduce it. You don't.
Right down.
You know, vacillate.
So I think the council can provide that kind of down payment assistance. I think the council needs to be careful about where it's doing it and where it's not. I think Virginia's given some pretty strict, pretty narrow parameters of why you'd be doing it here. I don't know how you communicate it to somebody or how you tell somebody that, how they market it that way. I
Just
suppose
tell the
you
realtor.
Tell them, but no, I think the council can do that if it wants.
If they market that way, that is the realtor's problem. The relationship is between the buyer or the seller and the realtor, not the city.
Well, if those people are relying on the city's commitment for, that's
No, Nick, you're wrong. Because if there's a realtor involved, there's a realtor negotiation there. And the burden is not
I called
on
him
the city.
Virginia. Now
The
he's...
city has made it clear it's 20%.
Can you put her on the microphone so she can be heard by the public?
I think we just have to, you have to, sometimes sometimes it's tough, to be a city and to be on the council. But you have to make decisions. And it isn't going to get any easier if you kick it down the road.
Well,
Because we're right
this is
now.
only discussion. There's no decision. This is just a discussion tonight, Dottie, so we could put it on the agenda next month also for further discussion, or as a agenda item to
I'm just saying,
consider.
rental properties don't come up that often for sale. So we've got an opportunity here. I think we should take it. I guess I should make a motion. I want a motion that we offer a $5,000 down payment assistance.
Can I ask, Virginia,
Oh, yeah.
do we know what the revenue stream of that one partial rental permit looks like? I would be more comfortable knowing what your rental stream might be.
I think you have to
No
have
motion.
something on the agenda.
Okay.
So the public.
I mean, it was in my
next week,
report, but yeah,
we could say consider and discuss,
that's fine.
be worded. So that's why I was suggesting let's put it on the agenda.
I'll bring this one back next month. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, Dottie, it's going to go on next month's agenda to consider. And is there anything else?
No, I just want to call attention to something from my report that at some point there is going to be tree work needed to mitigate risk of damage to property from the Swisher Tract in the next year or so. And so council is going to need to decide if they want funds for that work to come out of the tree board budget, the general fund, or if they want it to come out of the Swisher bond for park improvements.
What
So
type of
be thinking
property
about that.
damage are you contemplating? What does that mean? Is it going to fall on somebody's roof?
Potentially, yeah. Has been in my report before. I don't know if you remember that.
No.
A large
I just wanted to clarify.
chunk of cottonwood last fall fell from the Swisher Tract onto my neighbor's front yard and missed the house by only a couple of feet.
Are you hiring Black Squirrel to do the work?
We're
They
going to
have
run a
great
contract.
rates. I was really excited to see the invoices for all their services that they were running on.
When we get bids, they generally win because I don't know
price
how
well.
they price so low.
Yeah.
This would be a little bit different kind of work though, because in this case, we're not removing a street tree needs to be removed completely. In this case, we only need to mitigate the risk, which might mean removing one limb. It might mean cutting the tree off at 20 feet and leaving a wildlife snag. So it's going to be very different type of work. But anyway, it's going to be a chunk of money that we're going to need to spend to ensure safety of people and property, and you need to decide where that money is going to come from.
Can we decide with some finality in February? Because I wanted to ask you, what are we doing with the tree board budget in terms of how it's going to be used? I went back and I looked at the vision program, and one of the highest recommendations was that we need to do better job pruning so that night light from our street lights will filter and make the streets and sidewalks safer. So
Yeah, we actually did that last
I
year,
know.
if you remember.
Yeah. So if you can help us temper that, that'll help us figure out where to better.
I mean, I would love for the tree board to have more money and take on all city pruning. That would be fabulous. So my opinion would be that this tree work cost should come out of the Swisher improvements budget.
Yeah, sounds reasonable. So yeah.
Is there anything else?
I did want to raise something else on your report because I did read it. I didn't quite understand everything about the trees, but I did pay attention. And one of the questions I did have for you is the schedule of proposed trail establishments and trail plannings start as early as February, and that concerned me because we are not done with public comments until I think we have mid-February public comments on Swisher, and I just thought that was an odd conflict between.
I think it is
slating-
good to start walking it
Walking
and
is one thing,
keep getting more
but
public
the other one is
comments.
to start flagging.
Mhm.
I think that's a very.
I merely sent out that report so that people would have as much time with it as possible. It's not a discussion item for tonight. We'll talk about it next week.
Well, that's right, but the point is, it was brought up, shared with council. I read it. I'm just asking you I have objections to the timeline. It's not consistent with a fair and open public meeting process.
Okay.
We're telling the public, come and tell us what your concerns are or issues, and here we are on the side going off and doing all sorts of things that are already predisposed, a bias in favor of some action. So I think that needs to be accounted for.
Do we want to talk about consensus on that right now? I mean, that's kind of what the next meeting's for.
Yeah, I don't think we can.
No?
Okay. So we're going to go on to the rest of Sylvia's report on the agenda.
One of the issues is a discussion on gender balance and hiring practices in UHPD.
Is this part in your report?
No, it's verbal.
Verbal.
But since Dottie can't, I'm a huge disadvantage, I'm just going to wait. I'll table this until the next council
Okay.
meeting, along with discussion on Swisher Track and access. Well, actually, this one, Swisher Track and access to state, federal, and private funding dollars is on a closer timeline. Grants for state assistance for parkland activities, everything from cleanup to design or to mitigate all sorts of different things. There are timelines on these REAP awards, which is the area that I'm specifically focusing on. And we have done nothing as a council to take active steps to put together a plan that is good enough to compete with other applicants throughout Iowa for limited state funds. I mean, the state has put together funding line items at the budget level for conservation, and we're not going to be able to tap any of those state funds because we don't have anything. All we have is opinions, recommendations, best practices, and that is generally not good enough to compete for free dollars, and that concerns me because there's nothing in hiring a green space developer and planner for parkland that could assist us to bid out a lot of money. Look at the fact that we can't even get 3 volunteers to join the tree board, let alone get volunteers to show up and clean up 11 acres of city land. And that is very, very concerning for me. So I'm going to get more information on some of these deadlines and follow up with finality on some contacts because we need to be able to compete. We need to be able to compete for free dollars. Otherwise,
$3 to be used for what?
for making improvements to Swisher Track. We need cleanup, we need trails, we need bays.
I thought
for-
public comment was still open on this.
Yeah,
We
you're
didn't know what we need yet.
contradicting yourself.
Well, it's
here.
not going to conflict with anything because most of these awards don't take place until, the deadlines for these grants don't take place until like the middle of the summer. So
Oh, the
I'm really
deadline,
concerned
okay.
that we just are not keeping an eye to the timetable of free
Well,
dollars.
I love free money, but I also love written reports.
Great. Verbal reports are completely kosher, so.
So we'll discuss it more at the work session on
Yeah,
January
We'll
15th.
do that, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Lisa, you submitted a e-government report.
Yes, I hope everyone had time to read it.
Yep.
Okay.
It was very detailed.
Are there any announcements? And, once again, the police announcements are January 22nd, Pizza with Police from 5:30 to 7 here at the Community Center, and a workshop with the police on
February 6th.
February 6th at 6:30.
Yep, Wednesday at 6:30.
Okay. And then our next meeting is January 15th with a special meeting to consider the CD and then followed by a work session with Parks. And is there any objection to adjournment? Hearing none, the meeting's adjourned by unanimous consent. Thanks, everyone.
Lisa,